I greet you all with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you as well for coming here on this day. This will be a fantastic debate hopefully ahead of us. I just want to introduce the two debaters that we have here. We have Brother Abdullah Andalusi from England. He is Portuguese of origin. He is an activist as well as a philosopher, as some would say. And then we have Michael Nugent. Who is a chairperson of Atheist Ireland, who is also an author and an activist for atheism in Ireland. We will begin hopefully with Michael Nugent giving a 10-minute talk, and then we'll have Brother Abdullah Andalusi. Then we will have 2 5-minute rebuttals, and then we will have a discussion hopefully afterwards.
Okay, I'm going to suggest in terms of freedom of expression that the first key thing is that we should be prepared to treat people differently than we treat ideas or beliefs, that we should respect people and we should treat people with compassion and empathy and cooperation and reciprocity and fairness and justice, and we should respect people's rights to hold beliefs even if we fundamentally disagree with those beliefs. However, I think that we should be robustly critical of the process by which people arrive at their beliefs, and we should be robustly critical of the content of people's beliefs if we disagree with them. I base my beliefs on applying reason to the currently best available evidence, and I am always open to changing my mind and changing my beliefs if I get new evidence. I don't base my belief on faith, and I don't base my belief on dogma. And I know different people attach different meanings to those words, so I'll tell you what I mean when I talk about faith and dogma. By faith, I mean believing something either because you want to believe it or you're afraid not to believe it, and believing it disproportionately to the currently best available evidence. And by dogma, I mean believing things without questioning them, or even worse, asserting that the beliefs cannot be questioned. So if somebody bases a belief on the basis of faith and dogma, as defined in that way, then I do not respect the process by which they came to their belief. I may or may not respect the content of the belief, depending on what the content is, but I do still respect their right to hold that belief. Now, a religious person may hold the opposite view. A religious person may believe that we get our truths from God, and that we as humans are not capable of determining what is the mind of God, and we have to accept what is revealed to us by whichever God you believe in as being the truth. And if a religious person believes that and genuinely believes that the creator of the universe is telling them this, then they'll be in the opposite position to me, that they won't respect the way that I approach my beliefs. You won't respect coming to beliefs purely on the basis of applying our human wisdom to the best available evidence, because you will believe that that is inferior to the revealed wisdom of the God that you believe in. But given that we all share the same planet together, we have to come up with some code of conduct that enables us to live together and have a set of arrangements about freedom of expression that can accommodate all of our beliefs. What we're discussing tonight is kind of somewhere in the middle of this. It's not specifically about our beliefs, although that's a significant part of it. It's about how we manifest our beliefs, how we express our beliefs. And I suggest that we each have the right to manifest and express our beliefs up to the stage that it interferes in the rights of other people. And again, we'll have a situation where there'll be difference of opinion about where we draw that line, even if we agree in principle about that. Where do we draw the line? And I go back to the original principle I'm talking about. I think that wherever we draw the line, we should add in another principle, which is that whatever freedoms or restrictions that we apply should be capable of equally being applied to religious people and atheists alike. We can't just come up with a set of restrictions that suits one of us but doesn't suit the other. We have to have a set of freedoms and restrictions that can be applied equally to all without discrimination. Now, again, where in that sense we draw the line, I mean, there are certain things that we probably all agree on. We probably all agree you shouldn't be allowed to incite somebody to murder somebody else. We all probably agree that we shouldn't be allowed to make untrue defamatory statements about people that unfairly lowers their reputation in society. But where we're probably most sensitively at our disagreements is the issue of speech that either disrespects what we believe in or disrespects our own conscience, whether that be a religious person's conscience or an atheist's conscience. Now, I'm sure we'll hear later what things offend the consciences and beliefs of religious people and Muslims in particular. I'm going to tell you some things that insult me as an atheist, and that insult a lot of atheists, insult our feelings and go against our conscience. In the Catholic Church, the Christian Bible says that while talking to Jews about their God, that Jesus says, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father you will do." We don't believe that's a reasonable thing to say about Jews. The Catholic Church considers homosexuality to be an objective disorder because it's ordered towards an intrinsic moral evil. We don't believe that. We think that offends our conscience. Pope Francis leads a church whose Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor told the BBC that atheists are not fully human. That goes against our conscience, obviously. In the Quran has passages in it that say that men can beat their wives in certain circumstances, that women's testimony is half that of a man, that women inherit half of what a man does. It suggests that you should, in certain circumstances, cut off the hands of thieves and kill disbelievers, fight non-Muslims until they're in a state of subjection. Now, all of those things go against our conscience and our beliefs. Now, you can argue, obviously, as you will, and I accept that this is a very valid argument. You can argue that these things can be interpreted in different ways. You can argue that they mean different things in the original Arabic than they do in the English translations, and they're very valid arguments. But despite those valid arguments, the way that they are published in English at the moment offends us and goes against our freedom of conscience and our freedom of belief. In the same way as things that we would say might go against your conscience, and we would say, well, we mean it in a different way. But nevertheless, the way that it is published at the moment offends and insults the feelings of many atheists. I would suggest most atheists. However, and this is the key, the fact that they are published in a way that offend our beliefs does not mean, in my opinion, that they should be banned. I'm quite happy to have both Catholics and Muslims say and publish these things that I strongly disagree with, that strongly insult the core of my ethics and my beliefs about the dignity of human beings. But I respect your right to say it, even though it offends me, because I think the key distinction between freedom of expression that should be allowed and freedom of expression that should be hindered is if it's aimed at ideas rather than individual people, then whatever belief that you want to express, you should be entitled to express. I think the most... actually, before I go to the next one, I'll just add a little point about Islamophobia. I think the area of Islamophobia is something that I find very problematic. And the reason I find it problematic is that it combines in what it's typically meant to convey two different things. It combines attitudes towards Islam and attitudes towards Muslims. That's typically what people mean when they say Islamophobia. That it's some sort of either disrespect or fear or distrust or prejudice towards Islam and Muslims. Now, I make a very, very big distinction between those two elements. I think that you shouldn't be disrespectful towards Muslims, but that you should be entitled to be disrespectful towards Islam. In the same way as I think that you shouldn't be disrespectful towards atheists, but you should be entitled to be disrespectful towards atheism. The ideologies and beliefs and thoughts of any religion or any non-religion are very different to the people who hold those ideologies and beliefs and thoughts. And I think that's the key, whatever we're discussing in terms of freedom of expression, that's roughly where the line has to be drawn, is making that distinction. And I think the use of the term Islamophobia in a way that merges those two concepts together makes it very difficult for people like me who want to oppose discrimination against Muslims, but want to retain the right of people to be critical of Islam as an ideology, that if you're couching your opposition to one in a phrase that encompasses both, it makes it very difficult to have an intellectually nuanced discussion about it. The final thing I'll say in this part, this opening contribution, is that there's a group called the Venice Commission, and the Venice Commission is a team of lawyers that advises countries on constitutional issues, and in 2008 they did a particularly comprehensive analysis of the balance between freedom of expression and freedom of religion. And I'm going to read just a brief summary from that report because it pretty much captures my own beliefs on it. The report concluded that incitement to hatred, including religious hatred, should be a crime. That insult to religious feelings should not be a crime, and that the offence of blasphemy should be abolished and should not be reintroduced. The report advised that the purpose of any restriction on freedom of expression must be to protect individuals rather than to protect belief systems from criticism. It said that people must be able to criticise religious ideas, even harshly and unreasonably, and even if it hurts other people's religious feelings, and I would add in there non-religious people's feelings, as long as they don't advocate hatred against an individual or against groups. The report said that democratic societies must not become hostage to the excessive sensitivities of certain individuals, and that freedom of expression must not indiscriminately retreat when facing violent reactions. Instead, the level of tolerance of these individuals and of anyone who would feel offended by the legitimate exercise of the right to freedom of expression should be raised. The report concluded democracy must not fear debate, even on the most shocking or anti-democratic ideas. It is through open discussion that these ideas should be countered and the supremacy of democratic values be demonstrated. Mutual understanding and respect can only be achieved through open debate. Persuasion, as opposed to ban or repression, is the most democratic means of preserving fundamental values. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I greet you all the Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. And if you're Catholic, Pax Vobiscum, which means the same. So I'd like to thank, first and foremost, the UCD Islamic Society for inviting me to this year, again back to Ireland, for yet another interesting debate. When they told me about it, I said, yeah, I'm up for the crack, as an Irish expression, I don't know. I'd also like to thank my colleague and respected debate opponent, Michael Nugent, for attending and presenting his case and helping facilitate today's debate. Freedom of speech or freedom to insult? This is the question. The debate today is whether freedom of speech includes freedom to insult or not. Today's debate is not whether we believe in the freedom for humans to exercise speech. No one believes in unrestricted exercise of speech in society. Everyone here agrees, I hope, however, that inciting people to violence, murder or rape is wrong and should be illegal. So today's debate is not about whether speech should be restricted, but what the restrictions should be and for what purpose. We all believe that within the law, people should have freedom to speak. The question is, should gratuitous insult be allowed within the law? In order to answer that question, we need to ask a fundamental question: why freedom of speech? What is the purpose of freedom of speech? If you look at the Western philosophers who came up with the Western understanding, the West didn't invent the idea of free discussion, but the Western understanding, like John Locke, John Milton, John Stuart, we all love Johns, Voltaire, Diderot, they came up with the understanding based on a very commonly expressed point, which is free speech is necessary for the pursuit of truth, for public debate and for discussion. It had a utility, especially John Stuart Mill's argument, that there was behind the ability to express your ideas. Free speech was there to facilitate people finding the truth through public discussion, persuasion and debate, but not as a license for the pursuit of voluntary Tourette syndrome. In fact, I dare say that the use of insult, derogatory and abusive speech is counterproductive to the pursuit of truth. People will find it hard to listen to someone who is ridiculed in public and belittled, no matter how strong their intellectual argument is. Now, I'm all for open intellectual debate. My organisation, the Muslim Debate Initiative, in fact encourages it. We give platforms to even the most controversial ardent detractors of Islam, like the English Defence League, the British National Party, and radical Southern Baptists who want to vent their spleen. On the more respectable end of our invited guests, we had intellectuals, politicians, advocates, including my esteemed co-speaker Michael Nugent, who we invited onto a platform in London to speak and debate certain topical issues. But the problem is with insult and abuse, not intellectual critique. Let us not confuse intellectual criticism with gratuitous insult that is abusive. It possesses strong psychological effects, and this is because no human being is an island unto themselves, but we as humans are social creatures who desire respect. To insult and degrade someone or their beliefs is literally degrading their equality to yourself, making them unequal or lesser equal to yourself. This is why people fight for respect, and the absence of which causes fights, if not even on the high end, revolutions. The intellectual founder of liberalism, one could argue he was the intellectual founder of liberalism, John Locke said, "Every man has commission to admonish, exhort, convince, another of error, and by reasoning to draw him unto truth." But then he said that we should do this, but our words should, and I quote, should carry with it no rough usage of word or action whereby the ejected person may anywise be damnified in body or estate. Voltaire said, "I hate calumny so much that I do not want to even impute foolishness to the Turks, even, although I detest them as tyrants over women and enemies of the arts." I think that was inaccurate by Voltaire, but still it shows that even under his own current prejudices against the Turks, which was basically Muslims, he didn't want to impute foolishness to them because he hated calumny. Diderot said, "Secular intolerance consists in completely ostracizing and in chasing through all sorts of violent means those that think differently from us about God and his religion. It is impious to expose a religion to the odious imputations of tyranny, of hardness, of injustice, of unsociability, even in the goal of bringing back those who might have strayed away from it." Now, the biggest straw man used to justify insult and even hate speech, for those who do, is merely to say that we're just criticizing ideas, not people. And yet the actual cases they defend don't involve criticism of ideas, but demonization, ridicule and insult of communities and their moral exemplars. If these religious figures who were insulted were still alive, it would be ad hominem at best and slander or libel at worst. An ad hominem is a logical fallacy. And to say we cannot tell the difference between criticism and gratuitous insult is to deny the intellectual capacity of humans. Thankfully, courts today and common sense disagrees. Take the example of Charlie Hebdo, which was no mild-mannered magazine. If any of you had seen the cartoons it draws, it could give the Nazi magazine Der Stürmer a run for its money. While most of its cartoons use grossly offensive images designed to provoke an insult, lacking any intellectual substance, its cartoons against Islam and Muslims were particularly vitriolic, playing upon stereotypes of Muslims being evil, violent and barbaric, and genuinely inciting hate against an already beleaguered French community. Its cartoons were so vile and borderline inciting that a teenager who merely copied one of the front covers of Charlie Hebdo, which showed a Muslim Brotherhood demonstrator being shot to death in Egypt with the mocking label, "The Quran is rubbish, it doesn't stop bullets," and merely substitute the Quran for a Charlie Hebdo magazine and substituted the Muslim Brotherhood man for a Charlie Hebdo cartoonist, was arrested in France on charges of justifying terrorism, and he just parodied the actual front cover of a Charlie Hebdo magazine. Another hypocrisy in the nail, a hypocritical nail on the coffin of French claims to support equal and free speech. Now let my opponent tell us how depicting a religious figure naked on all fours with a depiction of his anus in a star shape, along with a caption, "A new star is born," possesses any merit other than to ridicule and hate. That was one of the cartoons in the Charlie Hebdo magazine. I'm not even going to say who they tried to impute that was, but what benefit does that have? What intellectual critique does that produce? And to say, and to continue, It's not just me arguing this. Many Western philosophers, current ones, and Western governments have argued and understood the need for restrictions on hate speech, ridicule, and offence. Yes, offence, actual word used. In UK, one cannot cause gross offence according to the Malicious Communications Act. You cannot create an offensive environment for a member of the opposite sex under the sexual harassment laws. One could say it's an offence subjective, and yet it's part of English law. One cannot insult or use abusive expressions of race, gender, and sexual orientation in the UK, or incite hatred against people based upon their religion. In Ireland, it also includes one cannot insult or abuse anyone for any identity or characteristic, including their religion, and it uses the prohibition against insult and abuse stated in the statute. Likewise, verbal abuse is restricted and criminalised under laws that protect people from domestic abuse. Well, now people who have vested interests in any one of these pastimes usually tend to argue vociferously against them. A wife abuser will probably argue against restrictions on their free speech to verbally abuse their wife. Not threatening the wife, not inciting to violence, just verbally abusing the wife. So, it's my free speech. Would we all agree? A racist would probably argue against racial hate laws, and they said that restricts his free speech or her free speech. A homophobe would argue the same against anti-homophobia hate laws. A sexist will argue against verbal sexual abuse or sexual harassment on the sexual harassment laws. And it's unsurprising at times we see that atheists are leading the argument against religious hate speech laws or blasphemy laws. Now, for my opponent to be consistent, if insult be acceptable means of communication, they must also advocate decriminalisation of expressions of racism, verbal domestic abuse, expressions of homophobia, and verbal sexual harassment, because these all don't involve incitement to murder or violence. They're just purely verbal, purely expressions. When Women's Refuge, Sonas Housing, which I believe is an Irish women's refuge organisation, they said verbal abuse is as damaging as violence. Will we respond to them, tell these abused women to just toughen up and accept criticism from their spouses? No. Humans should respect each other. And if we truly believe that dignity is a right for all humans, then we should protect it from those who would deny that right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be ad-lib, so can someone keep an eye on the time so I can space the show on this? The first thing I'll say about racism and homophobia, which I'm opposed to. I spent yesterday speaking to the Irish Skeptic Society on the topic of how to build ethical and robust atheist and skeptic groups. And I'm strongly in favour of organisations not only being internally consistent with what they're doing, but also actively involving themselves in community outreach and in working with other groups who, like atheists in Ireland, are discriminated against. And that would include racial minorities, and it would include gay people in Ireland. It would also obviously include victims of domestic violence, and particularly women who are victims of domestic violence. We had a conference a couple of years ago here on empowering women through secularism. So we're very strongly, not only in favour of, but actively involved in work to protect and work with other rights groups who represent other minorities in Ireland to protect their rights. And we feel that it's perfectly consistent with that to support the idea of freedom of expression in criticising ideas. And the distinction between racism and homophobia and sexism on the one hand and criticism of religion on the other hand is that religion is something that you can either choose to be involved in or choose not to be involved in, that you can change your religious beliefs. As a supporter of Bohemians Football Club here in Dublin, I often say that football is worse than religion because you can change your religion, but you can't change your football team. But another thing that you can't change is your gender, you can't change your race, and you can't change your sexual orientation. And so, attacking those attributes of a person's being are attacking something that they cannot change, and that is not an idea, but is just part of who they are. Whereas religion is something that however strongly you are attached to it, the evidence is there that it is possible to change your religious belief. So that's one distinction that I would make. The other kind of core thing really is if you're not going to have a set of criteria that can be equally applied to everybody, the question then arises, who judges, who decides? Is it decided in accordance with an atheistic belief system? Is it decided in accordance with an Islamic belief system, or how is it decided? The only way that in a society where everybody lives together that you can fairly determine where to draw the line is again, if I go back to the Venice report, I'll give another quote from the Venice report that I think is relevant here. The report found that it is not exclusively or even primarily for the courts to find the right balance between freedom of religion and freedom of expression, but rather for society at large through rational discussions between all parts of society, including believers and non-believers. And I know, and this is essentially what we're doing here today. This is part of that process, and it's a very useful part of that process. But let's not kid ourselves in terms of some of these issues. What the background is. I mean, one of the background reasons why freedom of expression with regards to Islam is so significant in the world today is that there are a minority of Muslims, not acting as Muslims, but acting as what I would term Islamists in terms of ideology, who, to put it diplomatically, react disproportionately when people say things that offend them. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think that we would be having this discussion with the same level of urgency as we are. So I think if we're going to talk about trying to be consistent in protecting human rights on an overall basis and freedom of expression as part of that, I think we also have to discourage people from reacting disproportionately when their beliefs are offended. We have, for example, in our blasphemy law here in Ireland that we're campaigning against, there's a clause in that the first test of our blasphemy law is that something is grossly offensive or abusive in relation to matters held sacred by any religion, thereby causing outrage among a substantial number of adherents of that religion. And so the first test in our blasphemy law of whether something is blasphemous is whether or not it causes outrage. Now, I think that that's irresponsible. I don't think that the law should be encouraging people to show outrage when something is said that offends them. I think the law should be encouraging people to react more proportionately. Even if the law is trying to prevent people from saying things, I don't think incentivising outrage, particularly in such a volatile situation as we are in Europe at the moment, where outrage can escalate into far worse than outrage. The point you're making about Charlie Hebdo, I'll finish off on. I haven't seen the parody of the front cover, but I support the right of Charlie Hebdo to produce those cartoons, and I would therefore support the right of somebody to do a parody of those cartoons. I have mixed feelings about Charlie Hebdo cartoons. I've gone over a lot of cartoons in the publication. They're not things that I would personally draw myself. I actually used to be a cartoonist in a previous existence. They're not things that I would personally draw myself. I respect their right to draw those cartoons. I think they are attacking ideologies rather than Muslims, and there are cartoons within Charlie Hebdo attacking and satirising the French government and police for their treatment of Muslim immigrants. Charlie Hebdo is not a right-wing publication, it's a left-wing, anti-right-wing publication, and it is as supportive of the rights of Muslim immigrants as it is hostile to the ideology of Islam within France in today's society. The other thing that is typically shown about Charlie Hebdo is a cartoon of a politician in France shown as a monkey. And that cartoon has been regularly circulated, suggesting that shows that Charlie Hebdo is racist. Actually, what that cartoon was about was satirising a right-wing politician in France who had described that politician as a monkey, and associating the image of that politician as a monkey with the logo and the poster style of that political party. So that was actually a satirical attack saying these are the people who are calling these people monkeys. It wasn't a racist cartoon, it was an anti-racist cartoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Just to talk talk about the ideas that were brought up. First and foremost, I think we can all rationally agree that speech has a connection with action, and hence that's why you prohibit incitement to hatred. If you say we should be, islands unto ourselves, so even if anyone can say anything and you shouldn't take offence, it shouldn't affect you, then you should, by the same logic, then decriminalise incitement to murder, incitement to do crimes, because you can always choose not to do it, right? So why is it criminalised to actually incite or to tell people to do it? Surely you could say, well, they have their choice to do it or not. There is an inherent connection. But I want to ask a more fundamental question again. Why is there hate speech laws, of which my opponent also agrees with these hate speech laws against sexism and racism and homophobia? Why? Well, we know why. It's because it's not just discriminatory, it's you remove the dignity of people by using speech which is hateful. And that's why they remove it, because it hurts the person psychologically when you insult them for their race, you insult them for their gender, or use sexual harassment or verbal abuse as part of domestic abuse. That's why it's prohibited. So then I say, well, now we've agreed on that principle, hopefully if someone wants to contest that, then, well, let's go just the next logical step, or rather let's equalise it to the issues of religion. Now, when I say about religion, I don't mean that you can't criticise religion. I don't mean you can't say, someone on our platform, a debater, a Christian debater, said that Muhammad was a rapist. Obviously, as a Muslim, I strongly disagree. But he was a Southern Baptist Christian. He was very fiery, as they are. And he made this point. He had not a debate with us, because for that was what he believed, and he didn't intend. It was clear he wasn't intending to be insulting. This was what he was expressing his opinion, and we refuted him. I don't view that as insult or gratuitous insult at all. So even though it's a very strongly worded statement. So there is a difference between that, which is clear intellectual criticism, and deliberate insult. And courts go through this all the time. I mean, one could argue, well, what is a offensive environment? What does that mean? Or what does grossly offensive mean? What does hate mean? How do you prove someone intended to say hatred against a black person, or against a white person, or against a person who is called a homosexual, or whatever labels are used in the law? Well, the courts decide that all the time. And if you say it's unclear that we can't decide this, then again remove all these laws. Be consistent and remove all these laws and say we can't. It's too unclear, so so we can't judge by these things. And courts look at intent. They try to find strong evidence of intent to cause abuse, to insult, or to degrade and cause offence. And that is a very simple and rational criteria, which I agree with. But I say that, how is religion any less part of your identity than your race? I'd actually argue the opposite. Religion is really all your belief system, even if it's not a religion, which informs your morals, which informs how you view the world, what is good and what is bad. I'd argue that defines you more than just the superficialities of the colour of your skin, or just your particular sexual preference, which is not really a culture in and of itself, it's just a particular preference, or your gender. I would say that your chosen beliefs, which inform your character, define you far more than these superficialities which are protected under law. And of course, in UK law and in Irish law and in many laws, religion is also protected alongside other identities. So it's not just me saying this, but legal minds have come to the same understanding too. My colleague mentioned the report. Who was it? This report? The Venice Commission. The Venice Commission, where they said, the importance of rational discussion. I agree. Oh, I think this is your. Sorry, just pull the timer on that. So, where was I? So the Venice Commission said the importance of rational discussion. I agree. Rational discussion, not pictures of religious figures on all fours naked with their anus out saying, a new star is born. That's not rational discussion. I agree with the statement of the Venice Commission. It is said that only Islamists reacted to the outrage. Well, not really. When you see that the Catholic Church, Christians, even people of Jews, and many people have reacted with outrage, with many insults, abuses against things they hold sacred. Now, I want to reaffirm something. I'm not against intellectual criticism. As I said, I think I've demonstrated my credentials by practice. In Muslim Debate Initiative, we host many debates where it's very strong intellectual criticism, and that's great. But gratuitous insult is a different animal altogether. And so a person can talk about gender in an intellectual way. Even a person, I even saw the discussions where they say, is there any evidence to show that race actually determines intelligence or has any effect on intelligence? I've seen academics discuss that. All right? I don't find it offensive, and it's not really the intent to be insulting. But if you were to say that white people, black people, blue people are not equal and don't deserve the same rights, or they are evil, or they are X, Y, and Z, then that should be outlawed. So there's a clear distinction between intellectual critique and gratuitous insult. And we rationally, we all know this. I think the other points that were brought up, I just want to make some interesting other points. The US is considered to be more liberal, perhaps, or more libertarian, leaning on the libertarian side than Europe. But even in the US, which you can actually say, you can be racist, and you can be homophobic, and you can express it, and you won't get any consequences, and this maybe from your workplace, perhaps, but even they have rules against obscenity. There's laws against obscenity, laws against fighting words. Words that if you were to go up to someone and insult their mother and they punch you, that person is not prosecutable because you incited them to violence. Even though, just by what you said. So what you said incites them to violence, and that person will be prosecuted because you were the one that incited it based on you causing grievous abuse to that person, causing insult to that person. Interesting, even America, more liberal than Europe, still prohibits expressions of speech which in of themselves are not incitement to violence, not even hate speech, obscenity law. It's interesting, obscenity. Even John Locke actually discussed obscenity and didn't allow it. And I'll finish based on what Jeremy Bentham, who's very materialist in his moral calculations. Jeremy Bentham said something very interesting. He said, all exhibitions, which being to the minds of individuals taken in any considerate number, productive of uneasiness on a religious account, are offered to their senses in such a manner as that that the unpleasant sensation produced by them, whatever it be, is unavoidable. All such acts are, in my view of the matter, objects calling for the prevention by means of punishment. So even the very materialist Jeremy Bentham said that there should be laws to prevent gratuitous insult and inciting psychological damage upon people. And I really think that what I really call for is a consistency on the matter. We do it for superficial things, we should always do it for other things, but at the same time, we all rationally know the difference between intellectual critique, which I am 110% for. I even support EDL having a platform with us when people actually try to stop it, actually. So you know, we've gone out of our way when people are prevented from speech. We actually try to give them a platform, just so that was the best way to engage them is by debating them, and they were prevented by a campaign to stop us from doing so. But I would also say this: Charlie Hebdo are no exemplars of free speech either. They fired, I think, Maurice Sine, who produced a cartoon. They said it was a cartoon of a politician, I believe, which they said it was anti-Semitic. And they fired him. So Charlie Hebdo don't really care about free speech. In fact, and yes, they attack different religions, but if you look at Charlie Hebdo's cartoons, they actually attacked Islam much more in France, showing the pictures of Arabs with a hook nose and very actually racist against Arabs. You could reasonably argue if they did the same about with Jews in the same shape, same images, you'd actually say that was being racist. So I don't think that Charlie Hebdo has any moral platform here to be defended on this matter. So anyway, so I'll just end with this. There is one argument people say is that, well, if we attack the moral example of religion, prophets and so on and so forth, isn't this intellectual criticism? How can you be offended by that? I say, look, yeah, I accept intellectual criticism, but if you attack moral exemplars in a manner which is deliberate to produce insult, like the Charlie Hebdo cartoon of a naked person on all fours and so on and so forth, that's not intellectual critique. And if that was in a living person, they could sue them for libel, for slander, for a whole number of different laws for insult. So I would say this: all I'm arguing is that we already agree with the principles that you can restrict speech, which is not necessarily inciting violence deliberately. Now the question is, are we going to be consistent or not? Thank you.